When you hear the phrase the Middle Ages, what comes to mind? Probably knights, castles, maybe a world that kinda went dark after the fall of Rome, right? But what if I told you that's only a tiny piece of the story? What if while Europe was figuring things out, a massive, vibrant global economy was humming along, connecting continents in ways you've never imagined? Let's remap this whole era. So yeah, the popular image is all about knights and castles, a world that seems almost sealed off from everybody else. But the reality? It's so much more interesting. While Western Europe was reorganizing itself, these huge, bustling networks of trade and ideas were absolutely thriving elsewhere, linking continents together. It's pretty amazing. To really get the full picture, we've got to flip our maps around. Seriously. Let's forget about Europe for just a minute. Our story actually kicks off in the East, where the real engines of the global economy were firing on all cylinders.
Okay, first up, the Silk Roads. And we need to get one thing straight right off the bat. This was not a single road, not even close. You should think of it more like an ancient internet of trade, a sprawling web of caravan routes and port cities that crisscrossed Asia, connecting the economic powerhouse of China with markets in the West for centuries.
And this wasn't some chaotic, free-for-all marketplace. Oh no, this network was supported by some serious political muscle. In the East, you had China's powerful Tang dynasty keeping things secure. To the West, the huge Islamic Caliphate brought massive regions under its control. And right in the middle, you had these master merchants and city-states like Samarkand, who got incredibly rich acting as the brokers for the whole system. Now, trade wasn't just happening on land. The Indian Ocean was an absolute superhighway for commerce. The system they had was incredibly clever, using something called cabotage trade. Just picture it. These huge ocean-going ships would sail into a major port. And then, a whole fleet of smaller boats, run by middle merchants, would zip back and forth, carrying goods to all the little port cities. It created this unbelievably dense web of business. And this sea trade created some amazing centers of wealth. Along the Swahili coast in East Africa, cities like Mombasa and Zanzibar totally mastered the monsoon winds and became critical hubs. Arab traders were the key connectors, linking the whole region to the Middle East, India, and even further. And get this, it wasn't just a coastal thing. Deep in the interior, the incredible civilization of Great Zimbabwe rose to power, all built on its connection to this global trade. So you have these massive, thriving networks, and each one is basically protected by a superpower. But what happens when those superpowers start expanding directly toward each other? Well, you know it. They are absolutely set on a collision course. By the 8th century, the stage was totally set for a showdown. In the East, China's Tang dynasty was pushing westward, protecting its trade routes. At the very same time, from the west, the Abbasid Caliphate was pushing eastward, bringing its own huge territory together. They were like two tectonic plates, just sliding towards this inevitable clash, right in the heart of Central Asia. And that collision finally happened, in the year 751. After decades of pushing closer and closer, the armies of the Tang and Abbasid empires met head-on at the Talas River. This single battle was a massive turning point. It basically drew a line in the sand, stopping China's push west and the Caliphate's push east. It changed the map of Asia forever. But here's the thing. These networks carried so much more than just silk and spices. They were channels for something way more powerful: culture, technology, and big ideas. You can see this cultural ripple effect so clearly in East Asia. China was the center of civilization with a huge gravitational pull. Korea, for example, adopted its civil service system and even modeled its capital city after the Tang capital. Then, through Korea, those ideas traveled even further, bringing Buddhism, Confucianism, and a written language to Japan. But, and this is super important, this was not a simple copy and paste job. Influence doesn't just erase a culture's identity. Japan, for instance, took all these outside ideas and forged them into something uniquely its own. It developed its own forms of Buddhism, and of course, the legendary warrior aristocracy, the samurai, with their own strict code of honor. It's a perfect example of cultural adaptation. Okay, so with this picture of a vibrant, interconnected East locked in our minds, let's now jump all the way across the map to Europe and see what was going on there after the Roman Empire fell. And wow, the contrast here is jarring. Without the central power of Rome holding everything together, Western Europe basically shattered. The famous Roman roads fell apart, which made travel super dangerous. Cities shrank as people moved to the countryside. And all this fragmentation was terrible for business, and it's kind of what gave the Dark Ages its name.
Out of all this instability, a new system popped up, and it was based on one simple, urgent need: security. It was called feudalism. At its heart, it was a deal. In a dangerous world, powerful lords would grant land, called fiefs, to warriors. In return, those warriors promised to fight for the lord and protect the land. This system eventually hardened into a really rigid social structure, often called the Three Orders. You had those who pray, the clergy, who were the keepers of knowledge. Then you had those who fight, the lords and knights, the security detail. And holding it all up were those who work, the huge majority of people, mostly serfs, who were tied to the land they farmed.
So we have these two worlds, a dynamic, connected East and a fragmented, localized West. They seem like they're on different planets, right? Well, let's pull on a few last threads and see if they actually connect.
To do that, we have to look at two of the most powerful rulers on the planet at the time. Over in the West, you have Charlemagne, the famous king of the Franks. And way over in the East, you have Harun al-Rashid, the legendary Abbasid caliph, ruling from the dazzling city of Baghdad. And here it is, the one amazing fact that ties this entire story together. In the year 802, thousands of miles away from Baghdad, Charlemagne got a gift from Harun al-Rashid. And it wasn't just any gift, it was an elephant. I'm not kidding. An actual, living elephant sent all the way from the heart of the Islamic world to a Christian king in Europe. That one elephant tells us everything. It proves that even in this supposedly dark and isolated age, the lines of communication were open. Despite the huge distances, despite the different religions and cultures, these two worlds were talking to each other. They were engaged in diplomacy. The West wasn't nearly as cut off as we sometimes think. And that brings us to our final question. If an elephant could travel from Baghdad to Germany in the 9th century, proving these worlds were connected, why do we so often learn their histories in completely separate boxes? It kind of forces you to rethink the mental maps we all draw, and it makes you wonder, what other connections have we been missing all this time?